All right, everybody, on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about frontal shots. We know this is a controversial topic. Some people are all in on frontal shots, and some people are kind of all out, I guess. And I think that we want to try to cover why that's the case and some of the things that we look for if we're going to take a frontal shot, because it's like a lot of things we do is situational.
Yep.
Have you guys taken a frontal shot before?
I have not.
I've not either, but I've been a part of like Jake's last year, so I've experienced it, but not been behind the bow.
Yeah.
I think I've only taken 2.
Yeah.
One with you the year before, and then last year with Hayden.
Some of the risks and concerns with it that come to my mind are vitals are harder to get to than they are on a broadside or slightly quartering away shot.
Like, I think of like Ryan Kirby's got some really good visual like representations of like the skeletal structure and then the vitals behind it, basically of like where you would have to aim to not encounter bone. And there is a lot of bone unless you hit that small pocket, and it's like it's at weird angles where if you don't have something really heavy that's just gonna, single bevel, it just seems like the heavier you shoot, like the more it's just gonna not deflect and go straight through something. That's been our experience with both the shots that I've taken, where it does encounter bone, but it also just like passes through. So that's where I'd start, and then understanding exactly where the vitals are when they are facing you. And that's where, like I said, that Ryan Kirby's visuals, I think he's got them on his Instagram. You can even buy, like, he's got some really cool prints where he's got where the vitals are at all angles, even straight away. And you can just, like, it'd be a cool print to have for deer camp. So he's a wildlife artist, but so he has a bunch of different type of stuff. But that's some of my favorite stuff is just like
The vitals.
Yeah, he does it with turkeys. He does it with deer. And I think it's really accurate to what, because there's a lot of different information out there like that, but it's like it's very inconsistent, and like some of it you can look at and just know that it's not accurate. And I think that's really accurate as far as like where the vitals actually are sitting behind the hide and the bones and everything like that.
Yeah, and I think that's good to understand because Zach's been posting some stuff on his story about how targets that people are shooting at in the yard have that vital up there, and that's not actually where it is on a deer.
Yep.
So seeing visuals and actually understanding it.
And he's even got videos on his page where it's just like he's drawn where when a deer's walking, like if its legs back, where the scapula, and the humerus bone is covering the vitals, and like how much more that opens up.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I think understanding that is completely necessary.
Another concern would be a lot of whitetail hunters are hunting out of tree stands.
Yep,
and I think
that's a good point.
That's a situation that changes our opinion on it. Not to say that you can't. Like, it's not that you get elevated and no longer can you take a frontal shot. You just have to be extremely particular about what shots you're going to take and what shots you're going to have to pass up. And I think we can use some examples, but you mentioned the whitetail adrenaline guys and born and raised. All those situations are on the ground.
Yep.
And when that gets leveled out, that shot gets a little bit easier to get the arrow into the vitals. When we all started hunting more off the ground, we started becoming more interested in the frontal shot.
Because you're faced with it a lot more. It's
Right.
like a lot of times, like in our situation last year, we're calling at a deer where they're coming in like looking just like they'd be. He's expecting to be coming at a deer, so like they're walking right at you.
What are some of the other concerns that you guys see, or the risks with it? I mean,
I think there's high risk if you don't have the right setup. Like if you're shooting something that's lighter or maybe an expandable, and I'm just saying this because I don't have any experience with it, but it's not a shot that I would have taken before I started. I passed up on a lot of shots like that before I started shooting this setup and understanding. And I say this setup, and I guess like when I shot the one with you, I was shooting like 700 grain just because I was really worried. It's just like I don't know if this is gonna work. Everybody that's has more knowledge about this is telling me it'll work just fine, but I had never done it, so I guess I was just apprehensive to do it maybe, so I erred on the side of just like I'm just gonna shoot something really heavy because like if they're saying 550 will work, 700 will definitely work.
Yeah.
And we were going elk hunting that year, so that was another reason where I was shooting really heavy. But last year I think I was shooting like 525, and that one that we shot was like went in and came out in front of his rear hammer, like kind of
I think through the rear ham.
Yeah,
even.
through like the front side of his rear ham.
Yeah.
There's no argument there because like that was the fastest I've ever seen an animal die.
Yeah.
Like within maybe we could cover this with the clip of it, but I think it was like 10 seconds or something, wasn't it? Where it's just like I shoot him, he runs, and it's just like as he's disappearing, he's just falling over already.
Tree stand angles change it a lot to where there's a whole lot more risk there. It's way harder to get the angle to go in there. You like have to hit higher for it to exit in the place you want it to. So really that spot shrinks. So from a tree stand, yeah, I do think that the frontal shot is something that you got to really be particular about and think about where your exit point is. And if your exit point puts your entry point like way up by its face, yeah, then that's unethical.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be shooting with a bow at a deer's face, right? Like that's a problem.
Like I passed up a shot like that in Kansas a couple years ago when that buck was coming right down the trail on the ground even.
Yep.
It's just like he was bird dogging looking for a hot doe. So like he was coming right at us, but his face was like covering up his vitals.
You guys have been talking a lot about how animals react based on the conditions when they hear the shot go off. So like when you have one coming at you, how close are you, like in your brain, are you thinking, does this animal need to get so he doesn't react on my shot because the window is so much tighter on a frontal shot?
If the deer's on high alert, the closer the better. So I'm thinking inside of 15 in those situations. Like if he's already looking, he's given those cues that he's going to get soon. 20 is too far. 22 is definitely too far. But on the other hand, I think if the deer is totally relaxed and is completely preoccupied, has no idea that you're in the world. Now, this is easier said than done and takes a little bit of experience to get to that point where you have the presence of mind to be reading that body language. And sometimes you might have it and the next time you might not. But if you're thinking that it might be an issue on the frontal shot, don't take it. I mean, use your gut. Go with your immediate gut is the easiest way to do it. But at 22 yards, for example, if he's standing there and he's not paying attention to you, he's looking at another deer over here, you've got the pin on him, you've got a clear shot. I think that's a completely different situation. But you get past 22, and at least for my setup, that changes. But, for example, my girlfriend or Crystal, they're shooting these bows that aren't going nearly as fast. They're not shooting 70 pounds at the draw length.
They don't have the arrow weight.
Yeah, especially that Jake has, So for them, that shot's going to be more like inside of 12. Yeah. But reading the deer's body language as he's coming in and understanding what he's focused on in that moment, I think, is where you make that judgment call. And distance-wise, that varies based off of what he's paying attention to, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because, like, on the one that you shot last year, the one that you guys got, what was he, like 10?
Like 11 paces.
Yeah.
So the one I shot with you was maybe 15?
Yeah, I think it was about 15.
So I haven't taken one, past 15, I guess. So maybe that's the answer for now. But, like, I think I agree with you. It's just like 20, 22 is where I would consider it.
How much does that change for elk, or is it about the same, would you say?
For elk, I think you have a bigger kill zone on the frontal shot. The distance doesn't change. So I have a really good example that I want to talk about, and I really learned a ton from this.
The one that you shot, are you talking about?
Yeah, the first one. Well, I had not killed an elk yet, and I had seen them up to this point. We had been close, but I'd never actually had my pin on an elk to see how ridiculously huge that is, right? So I knew the range. I knew exactly that spot where the bull ended up coming to was 30 yards. He ends up popping through the opening and looking right at us, and he's head on. I pulled my pins up, dude, and it was like 20, 30, 40. We're all right in the kill zone. The thing was so big that, like, even at 30 yards, all those pins were just right there on him.
And that's how far he was 30.
It's exactly 30. This is the learning point. This was low experience at the time. Back to that body language thing. When we're calling to this elk, he pops his head around the pines. He was looking right at us.
He was looking for the elk that were calling at him.
At 30 yards, he had enough time to react and wheel to turn around and run. Luckily, he ducks and it just hits him right high, but hits him like right under the snout and just right into the throat. And when it hit him, it was like boom. Like that sound is really crazy deep. Like boom. And he takes off running. I remember my initial instinct wasn't good. And I noticed by the time the arrow was there, like his body was in a fully different position. It hit him way higher than I wanted, but luckily still was dead when we found him. So moving forward, Will I take the frontal shot again? Absolutely. But I won't take it at 30 yards, especially if he's looking in our direction. What is different about an elk and a deer is a deer, with my setup, I would be confident shooting a quarter-2 shot. I would not be confident doing that with an elk unless so for example, if you're shooting me and I'm quartered to you, I want this leg back exposed so I can actually get in there and pretty much come out the opposite side behind the shoulder. So it's like you're trying to fit it between the shoulder blades still.
Yep. And that's like he'd have to be at a certain quarter-2 angle to get that even.
Yep.
I feel like.
But I do want to talk about like where to aim and the vitals. How would you describe it, Jake?
I like like I was talking about earlier, the Ryan Kirby's like visual. And the nice thing about the frontal shot is like as long as you don't miss left or right, even if you don't hit the heart, I mean, there's just so much stuff that's like going to kill them really quickly that goes all the way up into their, jugular.
Stuff that goes from your heart to your brain. I mean, think about it on us.
Yeah, if got hit right in there.
If somebody was to hit you anywhere in your neck with a broadhead,
yep.
you're probably not making it out of that,
Yeah.
unless it's barely nicks you. But even then, it's like we have a lot going on right here. The ideal shot is about from the bottom of the white patch is another 4 to 6 inches down, somewhere in there. And you've got a spot about, yay big that you can hit one and go right in between the shoulders and just go the full length of the deer.
I'd say like top of the brisket, really, where all that hair collects together, basically. If you aim really
3 or 4 inches above that.
Yeah, anywhere above that really is going to kill them. Because like I'd say you'll be in the heart if you hit there. And then if they duck at all the way up through the white patch, really, as long as you don't miss left or right, like you're going to kill them pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think the left to right thing's the big one because think about how a deer can live a long time on a single lung hit shot. So the issue is if you're left or right, you might just catch one lung. Granted, you're probably going to get through, if he's straight frontal, get some maybe liver, guts, and he's going to die. I think like your Pennsylvania buck is a great example of that where like he's going to die, but he's not going to die immediately.
And that was a left or right miss, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it wasn't much. It was just shading the one side, so it just went tighter to the one shoulder.
Yeah.
So it just went one lung down through the rest of the deer and came out. I don't actually remember if it came out on the same side that it was shaded to or not. It might have went across, but it wasn't in that center. It was like more over here, I suppose. Like if you could take the whatever, a little bit bigger than a softball size that I think is the sweet spot, I was on the far side of that. And it got him, but I missed my center point, and I definitely needed to be, probably that far over from what I was.
He was walking a little bit like quarter-2, wasn't he, when he was coming down that trail, or was he coming straight at you?
Yeah, I think he was just so close that it felt like it was a frontal. I wasn't as conscious of my exit as I probably should have been, which would have just brought it over to go straight through the center of the lungs, and it ultimately was more of like a liver, one lung shot reaction, and he was still alive a few hours later, and that was rough. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I think that
but I think that's
the same thing though happens on a broadside shot in the defense of that.
Oh yeah, far more.
Lot.
I think that's part of the reason that I started just shooting what I shoot now and like wanting to shoot deer more forward.
Greg always uses the term high percentage shots. So if you're looking at it and you're thinking, I don't know whether it's broadside, quarter away, quarter-2, frontal, don't shoot.
Yep.
If you're listening to this and you've got tons of experience bow hunting, you're thinking, I would never take a bad shot. I believe that you're lying. There's very few people that have never messed up and in the heat of the moment taken a bad shot. I'm not saying that that's a good excuse. Always try to become better and learn from your mistakes. But if you're ever feeling like I can pull that off, I got 100% confidence. I feel like when I look back at all the animals I've shot with a bow, when it works well, it's like that you're gonna pull that off.
Greg would never say that I would never make a bad shot, but if I had to put money on someone that's probably not going to make a bad shot, it's going to be him. It's even he can miss a deer. I mean, he missed one in South Dakota. It can happen to anybody, but it's that guy's taken a lot of time to think about.
High percentage
And
shots.
I'd like to think that there's a lot more going on in that moment, like going through his head than it seems like, but he seems pretty damn cool and collected in that moment, which is, I mean, it's just like some people are, everybody's different when it comes to that.
I don't think many people would disagree that a broadside or quarter Norway shot has more room for error. I think, myself included, like I think that there's way more room for error when it comes to that shot. But to argue that a frontal shot isn't lethal, like I think there's more lethality potential with a frontal shot if you hit them correctly. There's a little bit less room for error, but as long as they're close and you can have a really high percentage shot and make a good shot placement, it can be extremely lethal.
Yeah, the couple that I've taken, it's just like I remember thinking, all right, I can do this. There's actually very little ways that this can go wrong, I feel like, and then pulling the trigger. It's just like, because they were so close.
Yeah.
And I know I can hit that at 20 yards, you know. So if they're 11 to 15, it's just like, I mean, what could go wrong, really? It's what it felt like.
If you're listening to this, too, it's like this isn't just something that overnight you can pick up a bow and be on year one of bow hunting and think, oh, I'm going to start slinging frontal shots. Don't do that.
So for someone that's listening that hasn't taken frontal shots but's going to go out and ground hunt, call the deer, and a frontal shot's going to be a pretty good possibility, what would you say they should do to prepare themselves, or how could they practice? Like, would it be looking at visuals of a deer's vitals from the front, or shooting at their decoy, or not their decoy, their target on a frontal shot? Like, how would you recommend someone like prepares so that they're confident in a frontal shot?
For me, I think it started with the arrow setup. Just like it was never something I even considered taking really until started understanding more about it being possible with the heavier arrow setup and cut on contact broadheads.
The other thing I would recommend is practicing hitting these super small areas, like I said.
Like a baseball, I'd say. If you
Yeah.
can't hit a baseball, that's what I'm trying to hit. Because, I mean, I think, like you said, it is more of a softball size area or maybe even bigger. But, like, I want to – they're going to move probably a little bit even if they are 10 to 15 yards. So, like, you want to be able to hit that tiny, tiny spot.
And every time. Be able to hit it every time.
Yep.
Yes. The other thing that I do is I'll go up and I'll shoot 3 yards. I'm talking shooting close, because you might not have the same trajectory at 5 yards that you do at 15. And I think that's another thing that I would say.
You're doing this on your knees or in like a realistic setup that you would be in shooting the shot in the same trajectory.
Yep. I think in conclusion, be realistic with your setup, your skill level, and how far the deer is and what his body language is telling you about what he's going to do when that arrow goes off. If you do those things, then your percentage of having success goes way up. But if you don't have a good setup, you're not reading the deer's body language, you're trying to pull it off at longer ranges, I think it becomes extremely unethical really quickly. But I would say the same exact thing about a broadside shot. If you're doing, just being careless and just slinging arrows, every shot can be unethical. Truthfully, the frontal shot is one of the most deadly. You just have to be really careful about that. Where with a broadside shot, you have a little bit more forgiveness. You have more room for error, but you also have more forgiveness in a bigger kill zone.